Sometimes life reaches a moment where everything shifts, not with noise, not with chaos, but with a quiet decision that changes the entire story. There comes a time when you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your intentions, stop handing out chances like they're candy. A time when you finally realize that your energy is a gift, your presence is a blessing, and your absence is a lesson. And the people who once took you for granted never expect that moment. The moment when you move differently, think differently, choose differently. They never see it coming, but when it happens, it shakes their world to its core. Because your final move isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the simple act of walking away. Sometimes it's focusing on yourself. Sometimes it's choosing peace over proving a point. They never imagined that the strength you gained in silence, the wisdom you earned in pain, and the discipline you built in private would become the very things that haunt them long after you've gone. They thought you would stay where they left you, but you rose where God planted you. They thought they broke you, but all they did was awaken the version of you they were never prepared to face. And now, every step you take forward becomes a reminder of the moment they underestimated someone who was always destined to rise. Your silence was louder than every argument they tried to win. There comes a moment in life when your greatest strength is not found in the noise you make, but in the silence you choose. Silence, real, intentional silence, is not weakness, it is power under control. It is the moment when you stop justifying yourself to people who already made up their minds. It is the moment when you choose peace instead of proving a point. And the truth is, they never expected that from you. They were used to the version of you that explained, defended, argued, clarified. They thought they knew your pattern, your reactions, your emotional habits. But when you fell quiet, when you stopped responding, when you refused to engage in battles that drained your spirit, that silence shook them more than any words ever could. Your silence became the echo they couldn't escape. When you stopped reacting, they had nothing to feed on. When you didn't rise to their bait, their control crumbled. They wanted the argument. They wanted the drama. They wanted the chaos that made them feel powerful. But you walked away from that stage. And the silence you left behind began to expose things they were trying to hide. Their insecurity, their manipulation, their guilt. Because silence is not empty, silence is full of answers. And when you stopped talking, they started hearing their own truth for the first time. They started realizing that the problem wasn't your tone, your words, or your reactions. It was their behavior. You didn't have to prove them wrong. Your silence did that for you. There's a certain kind of strength that only comes from restraint, and you learned that. You learned that you don't need to win every argument to win your peace. You learned that some people don't want resolution, they want control. They want you to stay emotional, stay reactive, stay predictable. Because as long as you were arguing, they felt relevant. As long as you were explaining, they felt superior. As long as you were responding, they felt connected. But when you withdrew your energy, when you stopped participating in your own mistreatment, the entire dynamic flipped. Suddenly they had nothing to push against, nothing to provoke, nothing to manipulate. And in that stillness, they finally felt the weight of everything they had done. Your silence taught them more than your words ever did. It taught them they no longer had access to your emotions, your attention, or your peace. It taught them that you were no longer playing the role they assigned to you in their narrative. You were no longer the person they could pull into arguments at will. You were no longer someone they could drain just to feel filled. By choosing silence, you reclaimed your dignity. You reclaimed your boundaries. You reclaimed your strength. And though they may never admit it, they felt that shift. They felt the loss. They felt the void where your voice used to be. And that void became louder to them than any argument they ever tried to win. Because silence is not passive, it is decisive. It is the moment you stop dancing around someone's insecurity and start standing in your own worth. It is the moment you stop trying to fix people who enjoy being broken. It is the moment you realize you don't need to fight to prove your value to someone who was committed to misunderstanding you. Your silence became your shield. It protected your peace. It protected your heart. It protected the future that God was preparing for you. A future that couldn't afford the distraction of endless conflict. And while they were expecting you to respond like you always did, you surprised them. You elevated. You grew. You chose yourself. And that choice, that quiet, powerful choice, is what haunts them now. They replay moments in their mind, imagining what they could have said differently, what they should have done better, how they could have kept you engaged. They didn't realize that your silence wasn't about punishment. It was about self-respect. It was about healing. It was about stepping back from anyone who didn't know how to value your presence. And now, while they're stuck trying to make sense of your silence, you're moving forward with clarity. You're stepping into new chapters, new blessings, new opportunities that require a peaceful mind and a steady spirit. Your silence was louder because it came from strength, not fear. It came from understanding, not anger. It came from wisdom, not defeat. And as you continue walking forward, remember this: you don't owe anyone a reaction. You don't owe anyone an argument. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. The moment you learned to be silent in the face of chaos was the moment you learned how powerful you truly are. And the people who once pushed you, provoked you, and underestimated you, they never expected that your silence would be the thing that echoes in their life long after you've walked away. Your growth became the revenge they never prepared for. Growth is a quiet force. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or grand speeches. It doesn't need applause, permission, or approval. Growth happens in the shadows, in the late-night moments when your soul is tired, but your spirit refuses to quit. Growth happens in the early mornings, when you rise before the world wakes, choosing discipline over distraction. Growth happens in the private battles no one sees, the tears you wipe alone, the fears you confront in silence, the faith you hold on to when everything around you feels uncertain. And the truth is, while they were busy underestimating you, doubting you, and counting you out, you were growing. You were evolving. You were becoming someone they never expected you to become. The reason your growth haunts them is simple. They thought they had you figured out. They thought your pain would keep you small. They thought their betrayal would break you. They thought your heartbreak would trap you in place. But what they didn't understand is that every wound you carried became a lesson, every disappointment became fuel, and every loss became the soil where your strength was planted. They were so focused on the version of you that struggled that they never imagined the version of you that would rise. They expected you to crumble, not climb. They expected you to surrender, not evolve. They expected you to stay in the story they wrote for you, never realizing that you were already drafting a new chapter they couldn't control. Your growth became your revenge, not because you sought to hurt them, but because rising is the most powerful response to being underestimated. You didn't heal to impress them. You didn't improve to prove anything. You grew because staying stuck would have meant giving them power over your future. You grew because you refused to let their actions define your destiny. You grew because your purpose demanded it, your calling required it, and your spirit desired it. And when you started choosing yourself, your peace, your progress, your potential, everything began to shift. You became a version of yourself that they could no longer reach, control, or understand. There is something unsettling about watching someone you thought you could manipulate walk into their greatness. They don't talk about it, but they feel it. They feel it when they see you smiling again. They feel it when they see you glowing again. They feel it when they hear that you're doing better without them than you ever did with them. They feel it when they realize your happiness does not include their presence. Growth exposes truth, the truth about you and the truth about them, and sometimes that truth stings. They wanted to be the center of your story, but now they're just a chapter you outgrew. They wanted you to depend on them, but now you stand on your own. They wanted to be the reason you fell, but now your rise has become the reason they rethink every choice they made. What truly haunts them is the realization that they helped create the strength you now carry. The person they hurt is gone. The person they overlooked is gone. The person they tried to break is gone. In their place stands someone wiser, stronger, calmer, more grounded, and more powerful than they ever expected. And that transformation wasn't loud, it was steady, it was intentional, it was sacred. You grew in a way that made their old ways irrelevant. You matured in a way that made their games ineffective. You expanded in a way that made their presence unnecessary. And while you're walking into new blessings, new connections, new opportunities, they're left standing in the shadow of what they lost. Growth is the kind of revenge that doesn't require bitterness. It doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't require you to match anyone's energy. Your evolution speaks for itself. Your success speaks for itself. Your healing speaks for itself. Every time you level up, every time you elevate your mindset, every time you choose peace over pettiness, your growth becomes another reminder of why you were never meant to stay where they left you. And while they may try to pretend they're unbothered, deep down, they feel the shift. They feel the gap widening. They feel the distance your growth created. You didn't leave them behind out of anger. You outgrew them through purpose. And here's the beautiful truth. Your growth is not done. This is only the beginning. There are still levels in you that even you haven't touched yet. There are blessings with your name on them. There are opportunities waiting for the version of you that is still unfolding. There are doors opening because you dared to grow when others expected you to shrink. And the more you grow, the more you separate yourself from every person, every environment, and every habit that once tried to limit you. Your growth became the revenge they never prepared for because they never expected you to rise. They never expected you to heal. They never expected you to win quietly. But here you are, stronger in your silence, clearer in your purpose, and unshakable in your faith. You didn't just move on, you leveled up. You didn't just survive, you transformed. And now every step forward you take becomes a reminder to them that they miscalculated the power inside you. Your growth is your victory. Your evolution is your testimony. And the best part, you're still becoming. Walking away became the move that shifted the entire game. There comes a point in life when staying becomes more dangerous to your spirit than leaving. A point where you realize that holding on is costing you more than letting go ever will. And when that moment arrives, walking away is not an escape. It is a declaration. A declaration that your worth is non-negotiable, your peace is priceless, and your future is no longer up for debate. They thought you would stay forever. They counted on your loyalty, your consistency, your forgiving heart. They depended on your fear of starting over. They believed you were too invested, too emotional, too attached to ever step away. But what they failed to see was the strength building inside you, the clarity forming silently, and the courage rising with each disappointment. When you finally walked away, it wasn't sudden, it was overdue, and that step, that single step toward your own freedom, shifted the entire game. When you leave a situation that no longer honors your soul, the first thing that changes is you. Your breathing becomes easier, your mind becomes clearer, and your spirit becomes lighter. But the second thing that changes is them. Because your absence hits harder than your presence ever did. They never realized how much you held together, how much you carried, how much you poured in, how much you protected. They didn't see your value until it was gone, and when you walked away, it forced them to face a reality they weren't prepared for. Their comfort depended on your sacrifice. Their confidence depended on your silence. Their power depended on your emotional investment. And the moment you stepped away, everything they built on your back began to collapse. Walking away is not weakness. In fact, it is the strongest move a person can make when love, loyalty, or effort is no longer being reciprocated. It takes strength to say, "I deserve better." It takes courage to leave behind a story that you once prayed would work. It takes wisdom to know when a chapter has reached its end. And you learn that wisdom the hard way, through disappointment, through frustration, through betrayal, through moments where you questioned your own value. But the most powerful lesson you learned was this: you can love someone and still choose to walk away. You can care deeply and still protect your peace. You can want something to work and still refuse to tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, or neglect. What haunts them now is not that you left, but how you left. You didn't leave with bitterness or chaos. You didn't beg them to see your worth one last time. You didn't attempt to sabotage their life or expose their flaws. You simply removed yourself, quietly, calmly, completely. And that calmness shook them more than any confrontation ever could. Because calmness after chaos is a sign of healing. Silence after disrespect is a sign of clarity. Distance after disappointment is a sign of growth. Your decision to walk away without theatrics forced them to face themselves. It forced them to see what they had, and more importantly, what they have now lost. And as you walked away, the world around you opened up. You began to see possibilities you were too drained to notice before. You discovered parts of yourself that had been buried under stress, conflict, and confusion. You found strength in places you didn't know existed. You found peace in your own company. You found freedom in making choices that honor your future instead of your fears. And with each step away from what broke you, you stepped closer to what was meant for you. You became stronger. You became clearer. You became untouchable in a way that made your past self proud. Meanwhile, the same people who once took you for granted began to feel the shift deeply. They replay conversations. They revisit memories. They rehearse what they should have done differently. Your absence became the mirror they can't turn away from. It reflects their mistakes, their selfishness, their inability to appreciate what they had. It exposes the truth they tried to run from. That you were never the problem. You were the foundation. You were the blessing. You were the stability they thought they had unlimited access to. And the moment you walked away, they realized that they were holding on to someone irreplaceable. Walking away didn't just end the old chapter. It elevated you into a new one, a chapter where you no longer shrink to fit someone else's world, a chapter where you no longer apologize for having standards, a chapter where your peace is protected, your boundaries are respected, and your spirit is honored. A chapter where you finally understand that choosing yourself is not selfish, it is essential, and that understanding is what shifted everything. Because when you choose yourself, you take back your power, you take back your time, you take back your future. You begin to live not survive. Walking away became the move that changed the entire game because it forced everyone, including you, to recognize your value. It showed them that you will not settle for half love, half effort, or half respect. It showed you that you are capable of starting over with strength, dignity, and grace. It showed the world that you are not afraid to leave what no longer aligns with the person you are becoming. And now as you stand in the strength of your new chapter, remember this. Sometimes walking away is not the end. It is the beginning of your healing, the beginning of your peace, the beginning of your transformation. They never expected you to walk away. They never expected your courage. They never expected your elevation. And now the step you took for your own good has become the moment they replay in their mind, the moment that haunts them, the moment that changed everything. Your healing revealed the truth about who they really were. Healing is a powerful journey, not a straight line, not a quick fix, but a deep transformative process that uncovers the truth layer by layer. When you began healing, you didn't just patch the wounds, you started understanding them. You didn't just move forward, you grew wiser. And in that growth, something unexpected happened. The truth about the people around you, especially those who once hurt you, became clearer than ever before. Healing didn't only show you who you were becoming, it exposed who they had always been. And that truth is what now unsettles them, because your healing removed the fog that once protected their behavior, their excuses, and their manipulations. There was a time when you interpreted their selfishness as love, their inconsistency as humanity, their coldness as stress, their distance as busyness. You gave people grace, not because they earned it, but because your heart was built that way. You saw the best in them even when they showed you their worst. You explained away the red flags. You justified their disrespect. You tried to believe their words, even when their actions contradicted everything. But healing taught you to stop romanticizing potential and start recognizing patterns. It taught you that love doesn't hurt like that, honesty doesn't hide like that, and loyalty doesn't betray like that. The moment you began healing, you started seeing them clearly, and that clarity is what they feared the most. As you healed, you stopped internalizing their behavior. You stopped thinking maybe I'm the problem, and started realizing no, the problem was the way they treated me. You stopped apologizing for things you didn't do. You stopped shrinking yourself so they could feel bigger. You stopped trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Your healing shifted the narrative they depended on. As long as you were wounded, you were easier to control. As long as you felt lost, you were easier to manipulate. As long as you questioned your own worth, you were easier to keep. But the moment you healed, the moment you remembered who you are, everything changed. You no longer tolerated their excuses. You no longer normalized their chaos. You no longer kept giving chances to someone who mistook your kindness for weakness. Healing made you powerful, and that power revealed everything they tried to hide. It showed you that their love was conditional. It showed you that their loyalty was selective. It showed you that their intentions were never as pure as you believed. And while they may pretend they don't care, deep down, they feel the shift. They feel you no longer needing their validation. They feel you no longer chasing their approval. They feel you no longer held emotionally hostage by their inconsistency. They feel the loss of control. And that loss haunts them because they never expected you to reach a place of strength where their words no longer move you and their silence no longer hurts you. Healing didn't just change how you saw them. It changed how you saw yourself. You realized your worth was never tied to their ability to recognize it. You understood that your value didn't decrease because they failed to appreciate it. You learned that broken people will often break others, not because they are evil, but because they refuse to heal themselves. and you finally accepted that you cannot save someone who chooses their wounds over their growth. Your healing forced you to stop trying to fix what was never yours to mend. You began choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over empty promises. The truth is, your healing was the biggest threat to them, not because you became someone different, but because you became someone they could no longer deceive. They depended on your wounds to keep you close. They depended on your confusion to keep you compliant. They depended on your loyalty to their pain to keep you from seeing the truth. But once you healed, they couldn't hide anymore. Their intentions became obvious. Their patterns became predictable. Their excuses became meaningless. Healing didn't just open your eyes. It closed doors that needed to be closed long ago. And what haunts them now is knowing that your healing removed their place in your life. They realize they can no longer breadcrumb you, manipulate your emotions, or return to you whenever they feel lonely or insecure. They realize you have outgrown the cycle that once kept you trapped. They realize the version of you they mistreated no longer exists. And they realize that your healed self is someone they cannot access, influence, or hurt. That loss, the loss of power, the loss of access, the loss of importance, is something they never saw coming. As you continue healing, you step deeper into your purpose. You start attracting people who are aligned with your value, your energy, and your growth. You start experiencing love that doesn't require you to sacrifice your dignity. You start receiving opportunities that match the strength you had to build. Healing becomes your liberation. Healing becomes your elevation. Healing becomes your revenge. Not through spite, but through transformation. Your healing revealed the truth about who they were, and it revealed the truth about who you are. Someone stronger than the hurt, wiser than the betrayal, and destined for a life that cannot be built on broken foundations. And now every step you take into your healed, empowered self becomes a reminder to them of what they lost, not because you hurt them, but because you healed beyond their reach. Becoming the best version of yourself is the move they'll regret forever. There comes a moment in life when everything shifts, not because the world around you changes, but because you do. A moment where you stop waiting for closure that will never come, stop chasing validation that was never sincere, stop shrinking yourself to fit into places that were never built to hold your worth. This moment, this internal awakening, is when you start becoming the best version of yourself. Not the version they tried to limit, not the version they tried to control, not the version they tried to break, but the version you were always meant to be. And while your transformation is a blessing for you, it becomes a haunting memory for them, because they never expected you to rise to a level where they can no longer reach you, touch you, or influence your peace. Becoming the best version of yourself doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the fires of disappointment, in the storms of betrayal, in the quiet nights where your heart aches but your spirit refuses to surrender. It happens when life forces you to look at everything you've tolerated, everything you've accepted, and everything you've been carrying for far too long. You began shedding the weight that wasn't yours, breaking the cycles that didn't serve you, and releasing the people who only loved the weaker parts of you. And as you grew, something miraculous happened. You stopped living for them and started living for yourself. You learned how to set boundaries without guilt. You learned how to protect your peace from those who once thrived on disturbing it. You learned how to say no without explaining, how to walk away without looking back, and how to evolve without waiting for permission. You started choosing your growth over their comfort, your joy over their expectations, your truth over their manipulation. And that shift, powerful, silent, undeniable, is what haunts them today, because they never imagined that the same person they took for granted would become someone they can never have access to again. They regret your growth not because they love you, but because they lost the version of you that tolerated them. They lost the version of you that excused their behavior. They lost the version of you that accepted the bare minimum. They lost the version of you they could lie to, gaslight, or manipulate. Your evolution removed their power. Your confidence removed their control. Your healing removed their comfort. When you became the best version of yourself, you became a version that no longer needed them. And that is the regret they carry silently, deeply, and endlessly. As you rise, they watch from a distance. They see the glow in your smile. They hear about the blessings coming your way. They feel the shift in your energy. They notice the peace you now carry, the strength you now walk in, the purpose you now honor. And each step you take forward becomes a reminder of the moment they underestimated you. They never thought you would get back up after the pain. They never thought you would rebuild yourself from the pieces they left behind, but you did. Piece by piece, day by day, silently and steadily, you created a new version of yourself, stronger than your past, wiser than your mistakes, and more powerful than their influence. Becoming the best version of yourself also meant facing parts of you that once felt too heavy to deal with. You confronted your fears. You healed your wounds. You forgave yourself for staying too long, giving too much, caring too deeply for people who didn't value you. You learned to see your worth not through their eyes, but through your own. You stopped defining yourself by how they treated you and started defining yourself by how you treat yourself. Now that the luxury has reached such an enlightenment, we must draw back. We must do, and that self-love, that self-respect, that self-awareness is what transformed your entire life. What haunts them now is knowing they could have grown with you, but they chose comfort over change, ego over love, and pride over accountability. They chose to stay the same while you chose to evolve. They chose temporary pleasure while you chose long-term purpose. They chose to break you while you chose to rebuild yourself. And now the distance between who they are and who you've become is a gap they can never cross. You didn't just move on, you moved up. Your success is not revenge. It's a natural consequence of choosing yourself. Your happiness is not spite. It's the result of healing your wounds. Your elevation is not arrogance. It's alignment with the life you were meant to live. And the more you grow, the more they are forced to face the truth. You were never the problem. The problem was their inability to appreciate your greatness while they had the chance. Now that you've stepped into your best self, they must live with the regret of losing a version of you they will never encounter again in anyone else. Your evolution is a reminder that every pain you endured, every mistake you made, every tear you shed was molding you into someone unbreakable. You became a force, steady, calm, powerful. And now the world opens for you in ways it never could when you were dimming your light for people who feared your shine. Becoming the best version of yourself is not just your victory, it is your freedom. And while you continue to rise, continue to shine, continue to walk boldly into your destiny, remember this: their regret is their lesson. Your growth is your liberation. They never expected you to become this strong. They never expected you to glow this brightly. They never expected you to stand this tall, but you did. And now, the version of you they once dismissed is the version they remember every time they think, "I should have treated them better." Your transformation is their haunting reminder and your greatest triumph.